Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to all our audience members today for what will be a very, very special live event, an incredibly educational event. We are very, very pleased to be here with all of you today, and I know there's going to be thousands of folks joining us today. This is going to be an exciting journey on sort of an educational path on Islamic finance. My name is Hussam Qutb. I am a senior vice president with Guidance Residential. Guidance Residential is the leading provider of Islamic home financing here in the United States of America. We are also a subsidiary of Guidance Financial Group. Guidance Financial Group is one of the few organizations in the global financial arena that is creating operating businesses and investment solutions designed and structured to adhere to Sharia. This one-of-a-kind webinar will include a digital panel made up of three of the world's leading scholars in the field of Islamic financial transaction laws. The subject matter for our panel today is Islamic finance and its positive impact on society. So as we go through the speakers today, I will begin to introduce them essentially and their backgrounds. And really, I think all three speakers need no introduction. But for those who are learning about Islamic finance, the industry as a whole, the scholars involved in this industry, the ones at the cutting edge, the innovators, this is, I think, an important background that will help you understand the wonderful opportunity today to learn from these scholars. So our first speaker will be Sheikh Mufti Muhammad Taqi Osmani, who is a leading scholar of Hadith and Islamic jurisprudence. He is the son of the late great scholar Mufti Muhammad Shafi'i, who is best known for authoring Ma'arif al-Quran, an 8-volume commentary or tafsir on the Holy Quran. I happen to actually have a copy that I've had ever since I was very young. This is one of the best tafsirs of the Quran ever developed, and I encourage anyone who would like to read up on that. English, Urdu, and Arabic, all are there. Sheikh Mufti Osmani is regarded as today's leading scholar in Islamic finance. He is the chairman of Guidance's Sharia Supervisory Board and chairman of the International Sharia Standards Council for the Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions, IOFI. From 1982 to 2002, he served as judge of the Shariat Appellate Bench of the Supreme Court of Pakistan. He was the deputy chairman of the Islamic Fiqh Academy in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, where now he continues to be a permanent member. He's also served as chairman of the Sharia Supervisory Boards of over a dozen reputable Islamic banks and financial institutions operating in various parts of the world. There are too many to name, and we won't go through them, but you'll be able to find them all on his website. He has authored more than 143 books in Arabic, English, and Urdu. On the 11th issue of the Muslim 500, the world's 500 most influential Muslims, Sheikh Mufti Osmani was selected as the #1 most influential Muslim in 2020, this year. He also made the top 10 in the prior 3 years of that publication. And presently, he is the vice president of Dar al-Ulum in Karachi. Sheikh Mufti Taqi Osmani holds Alamiya and Takhassus degrees from Dar al-Ulum, Karachi, a master's degree from Punjab University, and a law degree from Karachi University. Our second speaker is Sheikh Yusuf Talal de Lorenzo, who is a scholar of Islamic transactional law who works with international financial entities, including institutional and private investors, home finance providers, investment banks, index providers, asset managers, and governments. He is the author of several publications on the subject of Islamic finance and has served as an advisor, served as an advisory capacity to financial and academic institutions, including the Accounting and Auditing Organization of Islamic Financial Institutions, IOFI, the International Sharia Research Academy, the International Center for Education in Islamic Finance, the libraries of Stanford University, the Hamdan bin Muhammad University in Dubai, and others. In addition to serving as chairman of several Sharia advisory boards, including guidances, Sheikh Yusuf is also the chairman of the Sharia supervised boards of the Dow Jones Islamic Market Indexes. Sheikh Yusuf assisted in the development of several innovative products and projects, including the Thomson Reuters Islamic Interbank Benchmark Rate, the first sukuk using assets based in the United States, the first corporate sukuk in Saudi Arabia, and a multi-manager platform for alternative investments. Sheikh Yusuf's career was featured on the front pages of the Wall Street Journal in 2007. He has been mentioned in stories on Islamic finance in the Financial Times, the New York Times, Forbes, Fortune Magazine, U.S. News and World Report, Newsweek, CNBC. I can go on and on. There are many, many references, and his work has been invaluable. Our third speaker, we're very proud to have Dr. Imran Osmani, who is a member also of Guidance's Sharia Supervisory Board. And he has been teaching Islamic sciences for the past 15 years in Jamia Darul Uloom Karachi, and has published several books and articles, including Mizan Bank's Guide to Islamic Banking. Dr. Osmani also serves as a Sharia Supervisory Board member and Sharia advisor to the State Bank of Pakistan, HSBC Amana Finance, Credit Suisse, Lloyds, Mizan Bank, and Pak Kuwait Takaful Company, and others. Dr. Osman holds a law degree, a master's in philosophy, and a PhD degrees in Islamic finance from Karachi University, as well as Alamiya and Takhassus degrees in Islamic jurisprudence from Jamia Darul Uloom Karachi. Those are the panelists that we have that will be speaking with you today. MashaAllah, you can see just from the short bios, we could have made them longer, but due to time, we had to condense them. But this is going to be a very insightful webinar that I hope all of you at home today will be able to enjoy. Before we begin, I'm going to go through some housekeeping rules just so everybody understands. All attendees for this webinar are on listen-only mode. It's not because we don't want to hear from you, but we have thousands of people participating. And so we wanted to make sure that we hear from our speakers uninterrupted, and we also get a chance to hear from you during the Q&A session at the end of this webinar. So there is a question box that all of you can see on your panel. So for just testing purposes, go ahead and submit, for example, a name and the country or state that you're joining us from today, just so you can test that question box out. And if you're joining us using a mobile device today, one of the things that I will tell you is through a mobile device, you will have to swipe left or right to be able to see the speakers or see the deck that we have for you today. Here's the program. Once I'm done with our introduction, Sheikh Mufti Muhammad Taqi Osmani will go first, and he'll speak to our audience members for about 15 to 30 minutes, followed by Sheikh Yusuf Taha Lorenzo and then Dr. Imran Osmani. And of course, as I mentioned, we will go ahead and open up the session to Q&As at the end of the webinar. A little background about who Guidance is. Many people know of the company, but many more do not know who we are as an organization. We are a subsidiary. The whole Guidance Financial Group is a subsidiary of Capital Guidance. Capital Guidance is a diverse and highly experienced international team of executives. It's a global organization. Essentially, it's a private equity firm that creates, manages, and builds unique companies. We're very fortunate to have Capital Guidance be the parent company of our organization because it was Capital Guidance that actually helped launch Guidance Financial Group in 2002 after a 3-year intensive research and development project. The chairman of Guidance Financial Group and the founder is Dr. Mohammed Hamour. The president and CEO of Guidance Financial Group and Guidance Residential is Khalid El Sayed. I'll walk you through a little bit of the footprint that Guidance Financial Group in just 18 years has been able to establish itself. It has been pretty remarkable from a time period perspective, Guidance Financial Group is a leading-edge global firm that has pioneered the creation and development of unique Sharia-compliant investment products for institutional investors, as well as financial products that address the unmet needs of millions of Muslim consumers. We acted to create and develop in the Middle East the first standalone mortgage company in Saudi Arabia. It's called Dar al-Tamliq. Dar al-Tamliq's first Sharia-compliant home contracts were offered to Saudi nationals in November 2008. The company quickly became the leader in home financing for the kingdom. We also expanded our footprint in Morocco by helping convert the second largest bank into an Islamic bank. We have a huge presence in Asia. Guidance Investments has been a pioneer in creating cutting-edge, innovative investment solutions. As part of its pioneering accomplishments, it's conceived, developed, and structured and raised capital for the first Sharia-compliant Asian private capital equity fund, the first Sharia-compliant China real estate development fund, the first Malaysian ringgit denominated sukuk issuance by a Saudi Arabian company, and the first Sharia-compliant Middle East and North Africa hospitality fund, which actually led to the creation of Shaza Hotels, a new luxury brand hotel reflected in the spirit of the East, located in Medina, Mecca, Riyadh, and 3 more locations coming soon, Jeddah, Doha, and Salalah. So significant innovations have been brought out just in the last 2 decades by Guidance. In the United States, Guidance Residential, of course, is the leader in Islamic home financing. This development occurred over the course of 3 years with the assistance of our Sharia Supervisory Board members in helping us develop this program, this declining balance co-ownership program. Today, we operate in over 30 states in the United States. We have provided over $7 billion in Islamic home financing to over 25,000 Muslim American families and some non-Muslim American families, alhamdulillah. Here is the Sharia Supervisory Board of our organization, and we're very, very proud of their efforts and all of the work they've done for us as an institution, but also for the broader Islamic finance industry. We have today with us 3 prominent members in Justice Muhammad Taqi Othmani, Dr. Imran Ashraf Osmani, and Sheikh Yusuf Talal Renzo. We recently lost one of our dear beloved scholars, Dr. Abd Sattar Bughudda, rahmatullah alayhi. But the work continues for all of us to help spread and continue to educate people about the positive impact of Islamic financial transaction laws. This group of scholars worked with us over the course of 2 to 3 years in helping develop this program of the declining balance co-ownership. And this involved 18 different law firms. It involved the 7 world leading scholars, but it also involved the general counsels of Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae to help us understand the lay of the land in this world of finance in the United States. This was an undertaking like no other, an incredibly innovative undertaking that has led to our success so far. There was the issuance in 2002 of fatwa related to this program that is available for everybody that wants to see the fatwas. They're in Arabic, they're in English, and they're in Urdu. They're located on our website, guidanceresidential.com. Without any further ado, I will now turn over the session to Sheikh Mufti Muhammad Taqi Osmani, who I understand has been under the weather recently. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help you, Sheikh Muhammad Taqi Osmani, heal quickly, a speedy recovery, inshallah. But thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule, even while under the weather, to join us today. The floor is all yours, Sheikh Mufti Muhammad Taqi Osmani.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Maulana Muhammadin Khatamin Nabiyyin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in wa ala kulli man tabi'ahum bi ihsan ila yawmiddin. Amma ba'd, I am extremely grateful for Guidance Financial Group that he arranged this webinar on Islamic finance. The basic purpose of the webinar is to explain what Islamic finance means and how it differs from conventional finance. I intended to give a detailed discussion on the nature and philosophy underlying the Islamic finance. But unfortunately, I am suffering from fever from about 6 days, since about 6 days, and it will be difficult for me to sit longer or give a detailed talk. However, I'll try my best to take this opportunity to highlight some salient features of Islamic finance that may help one to understand what Islamic finance is and how it works, especially in the context of home financing, for which Guidance Finance is striving to spread in USA and also in different parts of the globe. As one can easily understand that when we speak of Islamic finance, it means that our finance should be based on the dictates of the Holy Quran and the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When we speak the word finance in the context of the modern world, it gives an impression that it is a transaction or a set of transactions that aim to give money to someone for a specific purpose, and for that purpose the widespread tool used and adopted by the modern world is to give money on the basis of interest. But when we speak of Islamic finance based on the Holy Quran and Sunnah of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Holy Quran has emphatically prohibited interest, and there is very short verse of the Holy Quran that gives the basic difference between Islamic finance and conventional finance based on interest. The verse says, "Ahallallahu bay'a wa harrama riba." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed sale but has prohibited interest. Although these are very brief words, but if we study these words in depth, we will find that there is a very basic philosophy underlying this verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has differentiated between bay and riba, between sale and interest. The basic difference is that in riba or in interest, the transaction is always money versus money. While in sale or in buy, the transaction is money versus commodity or commodity versus money. This is the biggest difference between the two theories. The modern economic or financial system believes that money is like a commodity which can be traded in, which can be sold and purchased with increase. Therefore, all their financial transactions are based on interest. That is something above the principle to be charged from a borrower. But Islam says that money is not a commodity. Money is a medium of exchange. It is not an end in itself. No money can be used or consumed for satisfying one's hunger, nor to treat a patient. It has no intrinsic utility. It is always beneficial when it is exchanged for some commodity. Therefore, we must take money as a medium of exchange only and should not make it a subject of trade for earning profit. If we want to earn profit, we must take some commodity, and then we can earn profit by selling it for a price. So there is the basic difference is that sale is commodity versus money, and interest is money versus money. Once this principle that money is only a medium of exchange and it cannot be traded in, it cannot be taken as something to earn profit, then all the interest-based transactions are to be held as void. And this is the basic misconception that has destroyed the whole economy today. I have discussed this aspect in a number of my articles and a number of books, that whatever financial crisis we are experiencing today are actually based on this misconception that money should be taken as commodity. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has emphatically told us that if you want to earn profit, then you have to deal with a commodity, not with money versus money only. And this injunction was so serious that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us that if you do not obey this command, and if you do not forego the interest-based transactions, then it will be like waging war against Allah and His Messenger. This kind of warning has never been given by the Holy Quran for any other sinful act, neither for zina, nor for theft, nor for any kabair. But He has warned us to take the announcement of war from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if we do not abandon this practice of interest. So, being a Muslim, we are duty bound to follow this injunction given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no matter whether we understand its philosophy or not, no matter whether we grasp at the philosophy underlying behind it. But once Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to refrain from riba, we are duty bound to refrain from it without questioning it and without asking for the logic behind this prohibition. So therefore, now it is now about 14 years that the Muslims are trying to base their economy or their financial transactions on the basis of the Holy Quran and Sunnah of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if you sometimes it is felt by some people that when we go into the details and the consequences of the Islamic transactions undertaken by the Islamic institutions, sometimes it seems that there is no big difference between the two, because ultimately the outcome seems to be very like, and therefore they seem that this is nothing but just twisting the transactions from one to another. But the basic concept that is, misconceived is that if you see any Islamic financial transaction is not dealing in money versus money. It is dealing money versus commodity. And this is something that although in a micro level, sometimes you do not feel any big difference between the two, but if you analyze the situation at macro level, macroeconomic level, you will find that this has produced a very, very, very big difference between the two transactions, although they seem to be very, very similar. Because no Islamic transaction can be carried out unless there is an asset on which the transaction is based. Unlike the conventional system in which no asset is required for undertaking a transaction. It is just money after money. That's it. No asset is created. No real asset is transacted. It is only money that that is transacted for profit or for interest, and therefore now if you analyze the size of money supply today in the whole world, you will find that only 3% of the total money supply is real currency. That currency is also debt-ridden currency. This is only 3% of the total money supply of the world. 97% is nothing but digits fed in computers, and they have no real asset behind it at all. So this is the thing that creates crisis, financial crisis. And had it been that the transactions or money supply would reflect the creation of assets, transaction of assets, then the whole economy would have been based on real asset, real economy. Now, real economy is today just a bubble that is inflated day by day by the riba-based or interest-based transactions. So that is why when the crisis of 1958, 2008, the crisis of 2008, during this crisis, all the big banks, financial institutions, joint stock companies fell down and faced a big crisis. Although the Islamic banks and Islamic financial institutions also face some problems, but compared to the conventional institutions, Islamic banks and Islamic financial institutions faced uh, less loss than faced by conventional financial institutions, because the Islamic banks always deal in assets, not in money and papers only. This is one point that highlights the difference between conventional and Islamic finance. This aspect has been fully explained by me in my article that I have presented before World Economic Forum about the crisis of 2008, and it is widely published and circulated. One can see the details in that article, inshallah. The second feature that I want to explain here is about the home financing product given by or offered by Guidance Financial Group, which is based on the diminishing musharaka. And I think, inshallah, Brother Yusuf Darenzo will fully explain the details of this program, inshallah. But here I would like to point out one thing that sometimes gives some misconceptions about the diminishing musharaka. Let us first of all explain that there are two different things in the Islamic jurisprudence, Islamic fiqh. One is partnership or joint enterprise, and the second thing is joint ownership. There is a big difference between the two. If I enter into a partnership with a person and enter into a joint enterprise in collaboration with him, then both of us invest some money, and both of us intend to trade, for example, and then share the profit and loss of the enterprise. This is partnership. For example, I invested 1 million and my colleague has invested another 1 million, and then we started our business. So our basic intent is that out of this business we will sell something, manufacture something, sell something, and then earn profit, and the profit will be distributed between us according to the agreed proportion. And if we suffer a loss, then we both will suffer the loss. This is partnership. This is joint enterprise. Unlike this, there is another concept which is of joint ownership. Joint ownership means that we both have purchased an asset with equal proportion, for example. So here, none of us intends to jointly undertake a business. We do not intend to undertake a joint enterprise. Rather, we are we are purchasing a commodity, an asset, a property in which we are shareholders, sharers. But each one of us is quite independent of the other in the sense that if I have a share in a property, then I can dispose it of without the consent of the other party. I can rent it. I can do whatever I can with it, and the other partner has nothing to do with that. And here, if for example I sell my own share to the market or to a person, then the profit is exclusively mine. My other joint owner cannot claim any share in that particular particular profit. So sometimes the concept of joint ownership is confused with the concept of joint enterprise, and therefore, if there is, for example, one of the joint owner has suffered a loss and the other one did not, then they say that it was a musharaka, and then therefore the loss should have been suffered by both parties. This is not correct, because it is not a joint enterprise. It was just a joint ownership in which each partner or each shareholder or each owner has its own rights and obligations and risks and rewards. So sometimes this misunderstanding the difference between the two creates some misconceptions about the product that is based on the concept of diminishing musharaka. In diminishing musharaka, the institution and the client jointly own a property, and one of them gives it at rent to another person for use, and then gradually the other partner purchases the share of the joint owner, and ultimately it becomes the sole owner of the property. So this concept, alhamdulillah, has went well, and alhamdulillah, it is on the basis of the basic concept of Islamic finance that it is trading in asset, not in money. So with these two explanations and these two salient features, I hope that the concept of Islamic finance would have been clear, inshallah, and I hope that this webinar will go a long way to understand the concept of Islamic finance, and also to remove certain doubts that sometimes occur in the minds of the people. With these words, I seek your permission. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Jazakumullah khair, Sheikh Mufti Taqi Uthmani, for that wonderful talk and always enlightening talk. And given I know that you're under the weather, we are especially thankful and grateful to you for the time you've given us today. I understand if you are unable to continue through the session due to your high fever, but if you are terrific. If not, many of these questions that we have we're retaining and will be circulating to the shuyukh so that we can respond back during the webinar or later after the webinar. At this time, I am going to invite Sheikh Yusuf Talal Lorenzo to talk to us a little bit about this alternative that was created. Sheikh Osmani spoke briefly about it as this undertaking took place between 2000 and 2002, 1999 really, and 2002, over 3 years. and involved everyone you see here today, including others. So, Sheikh Yusuf, the floor is yours. I'll turn it over to you, inshallah. There you go. You are unmiked, I believe. You're self-muted right now, but there you go.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. It's a pleasure to be able to speak to you about Islamic finance in general today and about guidance, residential in particular. There's a lot of ground to cover, obviously. This subject is a complex one, but if we can go to the first slide, do we have this first slide here? Yeah. We, as a community here in the United States, our numbers grew in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and then especially in the 90s with an influx of talented Muslims from all over the world, of refugees who found solace here in the United States. And our communities built mosques, we established institutions of learning and charity, and eventually we also established institutions for finance. We realized very early on that home ownership was an important factor in one's participation in the American society in general. People need to have homes. It establishes them as taxpayers, as responsible citizens, as members of the wider community. And so its importance was never under doubt. But the question was, how? How do we go about complying with the dictates of our faith when the system around us of economy is based on interest? The Prophet ﷺ once said that a time would come when everyone, all of you, would be surrounded by riba, interest. And if you didn't actually partake of it, you would be able to smell it, tashumu raihat. And that's the situation today. It's all pervasive, it's everywhere. So the question was, how, in such a system, could it be possible to establish a home finance company that would provide necessary funds for Muslim families anxious to establish themselves and their communities, our communities here in the United States, in a respectable fashion, so that we would be able to say hello to our neighbors, Muslim or not Muslim. And let me say one thing also, clarify one point. Mufti Taqi, in his address to Davos back in 2010, the World Economic Forum, clarified at the very outset of his talk a few assumptions which were incorrect. One is that Islamic finance is only for Muslims. That's an incorrect assumption. Islamic finance is essentially for everyone because Islamic finance is prudent finance. It will lead to a stable economy. It will take us from Wall Street to Main Street. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Secondly, the misconception that he wanted to clear up, was that Islamic finance is this sort of niche business activity, and it's really a patch for Muslims, or a patch on the economy. Likewise, false. The third one, the economic theory that a sound economy is based on the desire for more and more production, more and more goods, and that greed is essentially the engine that drives all of this economic activity. Likewise, false. An economy doesn't need to be amoral or immoral. An economy can certainly have a conscience. Mufti Taqi also mentioned some of the fundamentals. I mean, the Sharia of Islam offers explanations of some very fundamental ways of looking at society. Obviously, from a religious perspective, from a moral perspective, a legal perspective, all of these different perspectives. But one of the most important insights is that money is a measure and not a commodity. Mufti Taqi just spoke about that. It has no intrinsic usufruct or utility on its own. If I have a pile of gold, what am I going to do with it? Well, maybe if I'm a jeweler, I can make jewelry out of it. But if I have a pile of dollars, what can I really do with it? Well, the modern economy has found something to do with it, and that is that they digitize it, they put it out into cyberspace, they blow air into it, and more air until it balloons and becomes a wonderful instrument of destruction, really. The true instrument of mass destruction is interest, and the way it floats through the economy, and the way that these exotic financially engineered products circulate through the wealthiest classes of all, leaving the rest of us nowhere, leaving the rest of us at the mercy of stock market crashes, real estate depressions, you name it, problems after problems. And we're the one who pay the taxes. Another principle, Islamic finance does not view lending as a business activity for the reasons that he explained. Lending money is not a business activity, it's charity. If you lend someone money, you do so fi sabilillah, right? Do you expect a return on that money when you lend it to someone in charity? You know, I mean, you may expect it to be paid back, inshallah, you will be paid back. But if you're not, you know you have a reward nonetheless, right? Yamhaq Allahu riba wa yurbi sadaqat. Allah gives increase to your charity, and He destroys riba. So the whole mortgage business is borrower-lender based. The conventional mortgage is based on this ribawi system and is therefore rejected. Now, to turn back to the history of our community a little bit, by the end of the 1990s, our numbers were such that we needed help in the matter of housing. Most Muslims, mashallah, turned to renting. Many were able to save money over the years and purchase homes outright. A few, I won't even say many, a few were that lucky. But for most Muslims, they found themselves in a real quandary. And so people wrote to muftis asking them for permission, please, on the basis of darura, on the basis of necessity, can we please purchase homes through conventional mortgages by means of these? And permission was given by several muftis around the world. Even some of the fiqh councils here in the United States repeated those. For the reason that everyone recognized the importance of home ownership in this particular society. As you know, the government promotes it. It's a way to stability. It's one, that's the interesting thing about the Ribawi system. The banks dealing in interest realize that stability lies where? In bricks and mortar, in homes, right? Real estate. That's where real value is, real assets, real solid stuff. And so they got the government to promote it. They got the government to establish Freddie Mac and in order to provide liquidity to the real estate market. They got the IRS to offer tax breaks to homeowners because the most stable part of the economy was that home ownership, real assets, real goods. In any case, we had at that time, by the end of the 90s, we had tried several different experiments. There were a few localized efforts in the form of credit unions, some housing cooperatives here and there across the country, especially where there were concentrations of Muslims. And in some cases, you know, there were a few foreign banks and Muslim banks that actually came in and attempted to make a difference. But their abilities were limited. They could not compete in the market. In other words, they had waiting lists. If you wanted to finance your home with a cooperative, maybe you'd have to wait. You'd sign up and you'd wait 6 months or 8 months or a year and a half before you could before your turn came, because they were short of liquidity, short of cash. They couldn't finance everybody. Likewise, the down payment was nowhere near competitive. You had to put down 40%, maybe 50%, 60%, and then they would finance the rest. Whereas in the market, as you know, 5%, 10%, maybe even less, will get you into that market, into the conventional mortgage market. And so the challenge that faced us was to find a way to make this possible for Muslims all across the country. We knew that we had to comply, first and foremost, with Sharia. That was the reason for the whole thing. But secondly, we knew that we had to comply with the law of the land. We had to fit into the system. We had to comply with local, state, and federal law. Hussam mentioned in the introduction the team of lawyers that came on. There were 18 lawyers. Actually, I think there may have been even more than that, because as you know, the United States, each state has its own set of rules and regulations for financing, especially home finance. And so legal counsel had to be consulted in every one of those states to be sure that what we had proposed, what the plan that we had made, the one that complied with Sharia perfectly, would also fit into the legal system and the regulatory regime. We also needed to be able to needed to be able to fit the product into the existing real estate system. In other words, the contracts that we helped draw up alongside the lawyers, the fundamental diminishing partnership contracts, had to be recognizable to the authorities. In other words, at closing time, when you and your family sit down at the table with the seller of the home that you wish to purchase, at the same time, you will take the with the title company representing the seller, you'll have to be able to present them with a set of documents that is recognizable. If you come in with a weird set of documents, obviously they're going to scratch their heads more than once. What is this you've brought to us? So it had to be something that they recognized. Likewise, if it's unrecognizable to the title companies, it'll certainly be unrecognizable to the insurance companies. And obviously that's mandated. You need to have insurance on your home. The same is true with regard to the Internal Revenue Service and county tax people. When they come to assess whether you're a homeowner or not, they want to know that you really are a homeowner. Where are the documents? What do they say? Do they really make sense to them? All of that stuff. In 1997, an Islamic group went to the comptroller of the currency, the OCC, and requested an interpretive letter in regard to whether or not their payments, not riba, but their profit payments to an Islamic home finance company could be deducted legally in the same way that interest payments could be deducted from their income tax. And decision, interpretive opinion 106 from the OCC came down in 1997 saying yes, they recognized it. In fact, in those days, the Federal Reserve Bank established a working group to understand Islamic finance, because they realized that our community was growing and that we had our own ideas about how we were going to go about financing ourselves. And then along came 9/11, and things changed, but not so much. Alhamdulillah, we weathered that crisis, and the work that we did stood pat. Another challenge, of course, for any company, any business, is to be competitive. So the product that we designed for guidance, the set of, basically, we helped develop the contracts. These had to be designed in such a way that the product, the home financing product, would be competitive. If guidance were to go out at a rate considerably higher than that prevalent in the market, then no one would buy it. I mean, not no one, but it would be the cost of being Muslim, we used to call it in the old days, all right? The cost of being Muslim. Some people were willing to pay it, but not everyone. And many people, rather than do that, would have remained in rentals. And so that was certainly a prime consideration. Can we go to the next slide now? Let me again clarify some misunderstandings. Having worked with guidance over the years, having traveled around the country and addressed Muslim communities on the subject of Islamic finance in general, sometimes for guidance and sometimes for other reasons. I've become familiar with questions that people want to have answered, and basic misunderstandings. One of the misunderstandings specific to guidance residential is the role of U.S. Bank. Because once you, the client, now the homeowner, have become installed in your home, you've gone through the whole process of getting vetted and cleared. You you've obtained insurance. You've signed all of the papers at closing, and now you're sitting in your new home. And the mailman brings you a letter from U.S. Bank with your first month's bill for payment, and you wonder, oh, okay, what's going on? And rightly so, unless it's been really clarified to you by your sales rep. U.S. Bank essentially is a service provider. It's a vendor. They do things for Guidance Residential. Their involvement is the same as the guy who delivers Pepsi Cola to the Pepsi machines in the lobby. In other words, they provide a service and they're paid for it. They have absolutely nothing to do with the contracts that you have signed, with the Sharia compliance of those contracts. They simply there to perform these duties. They send you monthly statements. They calculate your share as it declines. As Guidance's share declines and yours increases. It will let you know every month. It will provide help to you if you need clarification of something. You call them up, or you can write to them, or text them, whatever it is. They do all of the accounting, the number crunching in the back rooms, and they provide notifications when when you need to be informed of something. They'll send you a letter, or they'll call you up, and they'll let you know what's going on with your situation. But they have absolutely nothing to do with the Sharia compliance of the contracts, or with the maintenance, or with the essential nature of the contracts. Next slide. Yes, and then there's Freddie Mac. Freddie Mac, contrary to the understanding of many people, is not a bank. It was developed by Congress. It's not a private institution. It's a government authority. It was put in place by the government of the United States, by the Congress, in order to provide liquidity to the real estate market. So it is not a bank. It is expressly prohibited from taking deposits or making interest. It's simply, in essence, a clearinghouse for investors. It bundles mortgages together, or financing contracts in our case, and provides these to the market, to the investing market, as securities, mortgage-backed securities. They have the guarantee of the U.S. government. It's very reliable paper, a very reliable investment, but it has nothing. That's what they do. When Freddie, when Guidance, when the contracts for the financing are passed on to them, they're passed unchanged. There's nothing at all touches the essence of how those contracts perform, what they do. Next slide, let's move on. Another misunderstanding is that the government, wanting to see as many people in homes as possible, is promoting the home finance market, especially mortgages. 99% of this market is interest-based mortgages. So when the government is interested in making sure that people are not cheated, so there's truth in lending, they call it, they're talking to the majority of home finance providers, in other words, mortgage companies. So they talk to them in their language. They're lenders. So they talk about truth in lending. Now, of course, guidance is not a lender. It also, in those forms, also mention, in order to maintain decent levels in regards to what people are charged in interest, they speak in terms, again, that are understood by the mortgage business, which is interest. So they set a limit on interest. They want to know that these mortgage companies are not charging, absolutely ridiculous amounts of interest from people. So when you, the consumer, go to closing, you are presented with a set of documents relating to truth in lending. Why? Because even though, there is no lending going on here, you are, when you contract with Guidance Residential, you become essentially a co-owner. It's a co-ownership contract. It's not a borrower-lender contract. And so, but again, you have to sign these documents so that the government knows that Guidance is not charging an exorbitant amount of interest from you. And so our Sharia board has reviewed these various documents, and we've seen that quite clearly that they're based on terminology widely used by the industry, even though we don't use that terminology and we don't certainly indulge in any of those practices. Next slide. Oh, okay, here we are. I think that's, I've probably spoken long enough. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And I look forward to your questions, whether we are able to get to them today or whether we'll sit down and consider them and write them back one way or the other. No, thank you.
Jazakumullah khair, Sheikh Yusuf. Thank you very much for that insightful speech and presentation. I think you've definitely hit on some, especially the misunderstandings. You've definitely hit on a few of them that have been circulating in the Q&A about the investors, about these mandated forms, these disclosures, mandated disclosures. So we'll cover them in a little more detail during the Q&A, inshallah. But right now, I'd like to turn it over to our next speaker, Dr. Muhammad Imran Osmani. Dr. Imran, the floor is all yours. We're very eager to hear from you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. Amma ba'd. First of all, I am really very much thankful to all who participate in this webinar, and the organizer of the webinar, as well as the other panel members, especially my honorable father, who was in high fever and cough, and he had too much weakness, but still, alhamdulillah, he made some on our request that if he could join us. So alhamdulillah, he tried his level best to, alhamdulillah, to say and give us a good time. And alhamdulillah, after that we have Sheikh Yusuf Talal, who basically described the product, and simultaneously we were receiving so many questions from the audience, and they were asking different questions about different features of the product, and I was watching all these questions at the same time, and I was noting down some of these things. So inshallah, after my very brief summary, what I will discuss about this impact, positive impact on society of this Islamic financing, inshallah, we will try to answer these questions, inshallah, to satisfy you. So let me start with the first on the my topic, which is the positive impact on society of Islamic banking or home financing product. First of all, you know that when any particular regulation, rules are made by any regulator or governmental authority, so it is for the benefit of the citizen, for the state, or for the human being. This is from the regulator side. And how they do so? Basically, they use their minds, their five senses, or they basically use their knowledge or skill to develop or conclude a particular rule. For example, if we try to uh, overcome on particular illness or sickness, the scientists try to invent a medicine to how to treat that. For example, for fever, now it is very simple that you have the Panadol and you can get treated through this Panadol. But if you have high fever, that you might have an infection, so then you have to go for any infectionary diseases. So you can do some antibiotic or something like that. But still, you know that like we have in here COVID-19, but still we are trying to explore its treatment. So everything is not in our hand. It's not in our hand that we can decide what is better for us for the long run, for forever, for our eternally. So the divine law basically is given by Almighty God, by Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when the human is limited to understand any particular thing. He cannot understand or he cannot go beyond that. So, first of all, we have to understand this thing and we should believe and we should have trust that once Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives any particular ruling that this is right and this is wrong, then we don't have any capacity to understand or rationale behind that. Even we should not question or make any query to tell us what is the rationale behind that. There are so many things we abide by law. We do not ask any rationale behind that. So as we perform many worships. For example, we perform Maghrib prayer, 3 rakat in Maghrib prayer. We do not ask that why there are 3, why not 4, and why in Fajr 2, in Zohar 4, in Isha 4. So we don't have, because it is basically revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through his messenger that we have to do that. And whether we can understand its rationale or not, we have to abide by. We have to follow that. This is the main thing which we should understand. Secondly, the people research that what might be the philosophy behind this prohibition or this is permissibility, and they reached out some of these things and they thought that that might be the objective of that sharia, that there were should be these objectives behind that. But you know that the reality the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that what is good or what is bad for us. Just we can think, we can assume, we can make on the basically different reasoning that this is good or bad. So once we believe that our God has created for us this whole universe for our benefit, so if he says that this is doable and this is not doable, so then it means that the doable things are very positive for us and very useful for us to accomplish, to follow that. And if he has forbidden or prevented or disallowed something, so it means that it is very much harmful for us. For example, liquor or any dead body which is not allowed to eat in Islam. And you know that what are the harmfulness of that. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives in some things through a messenger who was ummi, who was not literate with any particular university, even he does not know how to write and how to read, and then he gives such sophisticated technical verdicts about economy. What does it mean? It means that it came from the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's giving us these rules that you should not do riba, you should not do gharar, uncertainty, you should not do qimar. There are some void contracts, there are some void conditions. So you know how we can expect or we can imagine that a particular person who is not literate, as we are saying that the university graduate are literate or something like that, but he's giving such sophisticated and technical principles which basically we cannot imagine that that person could give us. So it means that it has been revealed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and once it is proven that it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it must be in our favor, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created everything. We see that this beauty, the nature, the ecosystem, the greenery, everything is for our favor. So once he says that you should do that and you should not do that, so always it has, once we follow that, it would have a very positive impact. So I would say that once your contract is completely Sharia compliant and it does not have anything which makes it unlawful according to Sharia, then it must have very positive impact whether we see or not. So it will be visible or not, it will be certainly have very positive impact in this, not only in our individual basis, in micro basis, it would be on macro basis and overall for the whole humanity. This is all I would like to mention, that we have to believe that, we have to trust that, and we should not make so many unnecessary questions about that as we do for other things. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you very much, Dr. Imran, for that speech. I tell you, we have a lot of questions coming up. I want to direct to the audience, those who've joined us a little bit later. We did have the privilege and honor of having Sheikh Mufti Muhammad Taqi Osmani with us to deliver a speech on this very topic. He is no longer part of the session right now. He actually had to join us under circumstances where he's under the weather. He has a very high fever. He's not feeling very well, and we definitely wish him a speedy recovery, a full and speedy recovery, inshallah. So now we do still have our esteemed scholars, Sheikh Yusuf Talal Lorenzo and Dr. Muhammad Imran, with us for this next section of our webinar, which is the question and answer section. I do want to direct your attention to those in the audience to our handouts. We have a few things that can help educate you more in greater detail about the guidance program. A lot of the questions are related to the guidance program. There are some general questions that I'll address, of course, but the vast majority are related to the guidance diminishing musharaka structure, the declining balance co-ownership program. So in the handout section, you will see what we call the Guidance Residential, GR, white paper. That white paper has been approved by all of our scholars. It was drafted with you in mind so that it literally addresses all of the specific questions, many of which have been asked here. So it's in a PDF format. Please feel free to download it from the webinar and go through it. It's not a long read. It's actually a very short read that gives you the succinct answers to many of these questions. The second is just a biography on all of our Sharia Supervisory Board members, so you know a little bit about who they are. They are the most esteemed leading scholars in Islamic financial transaction law in our time today. So that is a necessary fact that we all need to understand. I know that our team has also shared in the chat box a few helpful links. Links related to where we operate, because there were questions related to where we operate, links related to the declining balance co-ownership program. So if you're not a reader, we have developed educational materials beyond just written. We've done a number of different videos, so there are links to those videos, short Q&A videos, motion graphic videos, all in an effort to try to educate, to help shed light, to have transparency over this structure, which is a very complex structure. And so our goal is to always be open with the public and help them understand what took place in those 3 years of research and development and what has been taking place over the course of the last 18 years in helping I mentioned earlier, top of the hour, nearly 30,000 American Muslim families become homeowners in a way that does not compromise on our deen, avoiding riba completely in the transaction. So with that, I will then now just, there are some questions that are really, really specific that I'd like to get to and ask to our audience members. Sheikh Yusuf, you had discussed in great length the terminology and the mandated disclosures that guidance and other mortgage companies around the country here have to provide consumers at the day of closing. These are not part of the contract. So there needs to be an understanding these are disclosures, mandated federal disclosures, and they are generated en masse for all mortgage companies to be required to be sent to those customers at closing. The question is, those mandated disclosures, the terminology they use, does it make the contract impermissible when they're referencing interest, lending, addressing the customer as a borrower, which we don't in the core contract, of course, because that's not what the relationship is. But does it negate the contract?
Well, the simple answer is no. We requested the government, actually, in our talks with Freddie at the beginning, our lawyers and ourselves. We requested the government, please change the language because this is not what, it does not accurately describe the transaction that takes place. And of course, they said, well, we can think about it, but really it's unrealistic because these forms are published in the millions every year. And 99% of the market is based on interest in lending. So there's really no scope for us to make a special exception for you. But look, these are disclosure forms. As Hussam mentioned, they're not part of the contract. Yes, they're presented to the home buyer at the time of closing because that's the federal law. The law wants to make sure that consumers are not cheated by companies, mortgage companies that are going to charge them exorbitant rates. And so they send out these disclaimer disclaimers, forms that need to be signed. That yes, we have been informed by our financing company that the rate is going to be such and such, and we're fine with that, and then you sign on the dotted line. But that has absolutely nothing to do with the contract itself, and certainly nothing to do with the Sharia content of that contract.
Thank you, Sheikh Yusuf. Thank you very much for that. It can be overwhelming for first-time homebuyers. When they sit down at the closing table, there's a stack of documents this high. And that stack of documents, the vast majority of it is federally mandated disclosures. They're consumer protections of sorts, right? And so the core of that stack, the core document, is the co-ownership commitment agreement. That is the contract. In a conventional mortgage, a loan, it's called the lender agreement. You'll see it headed, the contract is actually titled the lender agreement, which does not exist in the stack of documents that guidance provides. And so when you search for the core agreement, it's the co-ownership commitment agreement. That's what stipulates everything related to the relationship, the term, and so on and so forth. So that's a very important distinction for many who are looking at the stack of documents and wondering, oh my goodness, there's so many federally mandated forms here that are simply disclosing information, disclosing the nature of a mortgage, and they're using this inappropriate language like interest, borrower, loan, lender. So thank you for that clarification, Sheikh Yusuf. Dr. Imran, there's a question. Oh, yes, please.
I was going to say full disclosure on my part. I have recently financed a home by means of Guidance Residential. And at the closing, when we were going through all of those volumes of documents, the title company people turned to me and said, hey, this is different. It's the same thing. We understand it, but it's not lending, is it? And of course, I said, no, it's not lending. This is an equity partnership, a joint ownership. And they thought it was wonderful. So I think that there are many satisfied Muslims around the country who have experienced the same thing. And hopefully there'll be many more.
Inshallah. Inshallah. Dr. Imran, there's a question, and it's very simple and direct. What is riba? Would you take that one for us? Oh, let me make sure you're not muted.
Yes, riba is, basically has two kinds. The first kind is called riba an-nasiya, which is the biggest kind of riba, and the second kind is also called riba al-fadl. So usually the majority of riba is the biggest one, which is the first kind, which is called riba an-nasiya. This is what basically, if for example anybody is going to give loan and asking a premium of that loan. So if you are lending like $100 and asking to the borrower that he gives back 110, so this 10 extra dollar is basically riba, and it is interest, it is not allowed. But in case of, as my father has mentioned, that if money with money is not engaged, if you are buying a commodity, you are buying particular fixed asset, or you are going to take on rent particular asset, then it is not interest. And it is mentioned in the Holy Quran as well, that the people are saying that the sale is very similar to riba, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has permitted riba, permitted sale, but prohibited riba. So it means that all types of sale which involves commodity versus money, or commodity with commodities with different if they are not homogeneous, for example, because I told homogeneous because in some kind, if they are homogeneous transaction of these commodities, it becomes the second kind of riba, so which is also not allowed. But it is another subject and it's not very much relevant to us. So because the first type of riba is very much relevant to us, and many people have asked one question, brother, if you allow me, I will shortly describe about that. That many people have very similar questions. The first question was that if it were a partnership, so why there is no sharing a particular profit and loss? So my father has replied to this question that in Shirkatul Milk, it is called Shirkatul Milk, not Shirkatul Aqd. Shirkatul Aqd is basically a joint venture in which the both parties are partners for a particular venture to make money out of that, and they make loss out of that. But Shirkatul Milk doesn't need to be have joint venture. It could be or it could not be. So if, for example, if they don't have a joint venture to make profit through making trading, so then they are only just co-owner. For example, in this guidance case, the guidance is one co-owner and the other co-owner is the client. So the both intention is not to make a venture of making money out of that. One's intention is to give on lease to the other partner his share, which is called in Islamic fiqh ijaratul musha', to basically to lease out undivided shareholding to another party or to the partner. It is allowed by Sharia and everyone has allowed that. So if you are charging a rental out of that, so basically you are charging particular amount, a consideration of using that particular share of the fixed asset, and it is not interest, it is not riba. And one question also asked by someone that my father, honorable father, has mentioned that the both partners are stranger. Where it is written? It is written in every Islamic book of fiqh that in Shirkatul Milk, all sharik, all partners are stranger with anyone, with the other one, so that one cannot become the kafil or guarantor with the other. One cannot become the wakil or agent of the other. Otherwise, in the joint venture, if you are doing a joint venture or partnership, so every partner is partner as well as he's ameen or trustee of the other. He's the agent. He is also kafil or guarantor. So, but in this Shirkatul Milk, there is no such arrangement or relation. They are completely stranger. They can, for example, if two persons bought a car, they are completely stranger and they can buy a car. We buy shares of this joint stock company. We don't know who are the other buyers. We are strangers, but they are the co-owner. So basically, it doesn't mean that co-owners always be relevant to the other one. Okay, you can ask any question if you want. Thank you.
That's a great point. It's a great point. Can I add to that? Because I will say to our audience that there is an excellent book and written by your father, Sheikh Mufti Muhammad Taqi Osmani. It's called An Introduction to Islamic Finance. You can find it on the web. You can find it anywhere. The first chapter, the very first chapter, and if you read on a little bit, describes exactly what Dr. Imran here was referring to between Shirkat al-Aqd and Shirkat al-Milk. Shirkat al-Milk being the type of co-ownership that guidance is engaged in through the declining balance co-ownership program. Very different from a Shirkat al-Aqd, which is a partnership for enterprise, for business, essentially. So this book encapsulates the finite items really well, and I recommend it to all of our audience members if they are seeking to learn more. Sheikh Yusuf, if I can have you address the next question. Is it true that it is safer and more prudent from a Sharia point of view to rent using a conventional lease versus this option?
In some cases, yes. In other cases, no. People automatically assume that it's the safer course. But when you get into the details of a contract, that's when you begin to understand what's really going on, looking at the fine print. So some of our retail residential leases, and they'll vary from state to state, they'll vary from person to person, really. There can be a great deal of difference in them. Many of these have conditions that are unacceptable from a Sharia perspective. They'll ask for in late payments, for example. They'll ask for a percentage of a monthly payment, which is likewise based on nothing but it's not a fair exchange of goods for goods. This goes back to the whole Wall Street versus Main Street economy. Looking at the question of riba again, the Sharia wants to encourage economic activity between people. It's healthy. It improves their lives by means of circulating money, by means of providing goods and services, when these are real and authentic. However, when money is being traded for money, then what's going on? Nothing is being created. The economy is not being improved. On the contrary, it's being placed in more jeopardy. Justice Taqi mentioned the financial crash of 2008, 2010. It was based on that, just this concept that nothing was being, no real goods stood behind the economy. Now, of course, goods can be are defined by modern economists as goods for consumption and goods for production. And under the second heading, most economists, certainly not all of them, most economists say, well, money is a good for production, so therefore it should be treated as a commodity as well. But that argument is bogus. That's an unacceptable argument, certainly from a Sharia perspective and from a practical perspective. How many times do we have to go through the cycle of hills and valleys in our economies, right? Where every single time the poor and the middle class lose and the wealthy continue to smile at the top of the pyramid. So,
Thank you for that, Sheikh Yusuf. Dr. Imran, someone is asking, is the current guidance residential contract approved by Sheikh Mufti Taqi Osmani, your father, since it launched in 2002, and does he still support and approve the current structure? This is the assumption that the current structure has changed, which I'll say right now it has not changed whatsoever. But I'll let you answer that question.
Yeah, I was engaged with my father since very inception when guidance was started. Maybe it was late 90s when we were approached, and we have to work in these documents quite longer period. And I remember that with the chairman, Dr. Muhammad Hamoor, we had several meetings, and he had to discuss several times, and with some other lawyers and all the Sharia board members have different meetings, and especially my father, because it was the first product were launched anywhere in the world. I remember that even in Pakistan we have Mizan Bank, and we established Mizan Bank in 1997 or 98, and we didn't have the license for home financing at that time. We were given home financing license in 2002, and we used the same contract which we used, the guidance one, and same concept of that, which were basically discussed in my father's book, as you have mentioned, and it was also allowed by the IOFI. So the guidance was the first program ever launched in the world. And then I don't think, secondly, HSBC Amana, they have launched for some time in UK or for some countries. But again, I think they are not still anymore there. And nobody, I don't know, in any part of the country, except Pakistan or US, I don't know that whether this particular contract of Islamic home financing is found or not. I'm really don't know, but in US I can say that we were engaged with the very inception and with the all documentation, and my father especially worked a lot for developing these things, because it was the first time ever it was developing. So he has to do a lot of work, and I was also assisting him in these things.
Yes, Sheikh Yusuf.
Sam, if I might. Yeah. Maulana Taqi was, from the very beginning, always asking questions, he has an amazing legal mind, and the lawyers were astounded at the depth and breadth of his knowledge when it came to these matters. We spent months, years, meeting over and over again. We had, informally and formally, we discussed this in so many different ways and forums and places, and debated. I mean, there was not, agreement from the very beginning. And let me say this about Islamic finance. The reason there wasn't agreement from the beginning is quite simple. Islamic finance provides several different ways to accomplish a home financing. There are several different ways of doing it. But the problem is complying with the Sharia and then complying with local regulations, federal laws and guidelines, and then being competitive in the market. All of these factors have to come together in order for the product to work. So I, for example, was a member of the Sharia board that approved the first sukuk securitization in Saudi Arabia back in the 90s. The biggest hurdle to getting approval for that, even though we had several different ways of doing it from Sharia, the biggest hurdle were the Saudi authorities. Now things have changed. They're now very much, very familiar with the different modes of financing through Islamic finance, and they're comfortable with the different contracts and constructs. But to begin with, there were several jurisdictions. Indonesia was another one. They had to change their laws in order to accommodate Islamic finance, which was much better for them. And they realized that. So they took it to their legislature and they made the changes. So just to let you know, I mean, it was kind of, we had to noodle our way through this maze of very complex factors. And especially when you consider that there are not, that the federal United States is composed of 50 different states, with each one with its own set of regulations. So it's very, very difficult.
That's a very good point, Sheikh Yusuf. Thank you for adding to that. When I first became familiar with the organization in late 2002, I was, and I had joined just shortly after that in 2003. That was still fresh at the time. The research and development that was conducted for nearly 3 years, the involvement of all of our eminent Sharia supervisory board members, including yourselves, the work that was done involving, as we said earlier, 18 different law firms that understood housing and mortgage laws here in the United States, and then leading to the discussions with Freddie Mac. the discussions with Fannie Mae, their ability to purchase musharaka mutanaqqisa structured mortgages. This had never happened before, and this was new, and that challenge at the time was immense, because that would provide the ability for us to be able to serve all American Muslims and beyond. And so their ability to buy the musharaka mutanaqqisa structures, where I think brought to fruition with your help, with of course every single member of the Sharia Supervisory Board who worked through that with those attorneys. One of the questions that still comes up today is, by selling the mortgage to Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae, by selling the musharaka mutanaqqisa to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, well, and the questioner used the word loan, by selling the loan. First, I have to correct everyone. Anytime you refer to our structure as a loan, it's a mischaracterization of the structure. It's not a loan. There is no loan documentation. You're never a borrower, and we're never a lender. So the musharaka mutanaqqisa structure, when it's sold to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, is that halal? Is that something that's permissible? Sheikh Yusuf, do you want to address that, and then perhaps Dr. Imran?
Again, the simple answer is yes, it is, certainly. We were at pains to ensure through the documentation with our lawyers that the essential structure of the contracts would not change if the contract itself were to change hands, if it were purchased or passed on to another entity. So from beginning to end, no matter how long it takes to pay that off, it will always be compliant with Sharia.
Dr. Imran, any?
Basically, yes. Let me tell you about that. And as it was a first time to develop home financing program in US, and then it was another priority, you can say that privilege you had, that first sukuk, which is basically the securitization program for having the underlying fixed assets, not just receivables. It was first program ever launched in US, mashallah, and then followed by the others in different countries, in UK or Dubai or Pakistan or Saudis and somewhere else. This Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, Ginnie Mae, all these sukuk we used to securitize the underlying diminishing musharaka asset, not only the receivables, because if it were the certificate of receivable, so it would become the debt instrument, and we cannot purchase loan or debt, or we cannot trade in debt. But since underlying asset was the fixed asset, and every certificate holder is basically an undivided shareholder of that particular thing, so it is like a sukuk, so it is allowed by Sharia. And as I mentioned to you, it was the first time that we have tried very struggle and did a very hard work to make it complete sukuk structure at that time, and then followed by the other people in other countries afterwards.
Thank you both. Thank you for that, for addressing that for our audience. Question of benchmarking against the interest rate. So this is really the heart of the cost. The cost of the sharing or the consumer in this sense is utilizing a portion of the property they don't yet own, and so they're paying a profit payment for it, as in parallel to paying to acquire more shares from Guidance. So the question is, how does Guidance determine its profit payment? And there's an understanding that it's benchmarked against interest rates in the United States. Is that permissible?
If
I'll start with you.
You are a vendor,
Sheikh Yusuf, go ahead.
Your business, I think you had this on the guidance website at one time. If your business is potato chips and you produce halal potato chips, and the man next door produces potato chips that are produced with lard, so they're not halal. In the market, if you, with your halal potato chips, want to be competitive, you'll look at what he is charging for his bag of potato chips, right? It's 12 ounces, it's 16 ounces, whatever it is, whatever the price is, you want to be competitive. If you can undercut that price, then all the better. The same thing with a mortgage. The mortgage market is well established. It runs on its own principles. It fluctuates just like any other market. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down, sometimes artificially so, whatever the reasons. But the point is that if guidance or if any Islamic financial institution wants to be competitive with its product or products, then they need to be cognizant of the prevailing prices in their markets. So the market for home finance, unfortunately, here in the United States is 99.9% based on interest and mortgages. Now, if guidance wants to benchmark, wants to be competitive, they need to benchmark against that standard. So that's the long and the short of it. It has benchmarking has absolutely nothing to do with interest or with an interest component for the contracts that we've developed for guidance residential.
I don't know if you had anything to add to that, Dr. Imran.
No, I agree with that, and my father has completely mentioned in detail all of these things, and even IOFI, which is the issued the Sharia standards, it has allowed that to use, because you know that if you are in a certain market, you have to be at the rate of that particular market. Otherwise, if you make that particular thing to that your price should be higher or lower, then you cannot basically survive in the market. So it is not a determinator of any particular contract that it should be lower or higher than the benchmark. It is not the determinator. So determinator is that what is the underlying contract. So underlying contract is same, but to be in the market and to be in that same market, you have to follow the market rate. Otherwise, if you go lower or very high, either way you will be lost. So you know that every businessman can understand that thing. If you are selling a particular KFC burger with a halal shop, and then you are saying that particular burger on haram shop, but the rate must be high, otherwise the people will not go to that shop, which will be either lower or higher. So it is the same thing. So it doesn't mean it is just criteria of market rate, and it should be competitive so that the both parties could get benefit out of that. Otherwise, you know, if it is not competitive, so either the guidance will be in loss or the other party or client will be at loss. So it is very logical that it should be at particular benchmark.
Thank you, Dr. Imran. This next question is, compare home financing based on ijara with financing based on musharaka mutanaqqisa. While both are permissible, which is the fairer and the more appropriate of the two? I guess this is also, we'd have to consider ijara as well as the murabaha. There's also a murabaha structure, I think, that's available. Sheikh Yusuf, would you like to start us off with that one?
Sure. Like I mentioned, there are any number of ways to finance goods and services in a compliant manner. The Sharia has been revealed as a mercy to our community. But the principle of justice is at the core of Sharia transacting. The Sharia wants to be sure that the rights of both parties are guaranteed, or of all contracting parties are guaranteed. So in comparing musharaka with ijara, we'll look at the rights of the financier paying the full price of the property in cash, making the initial purchase, and the rights of the client, the home buyer, who pays in installments of one nature or another in order for the property to eventually become her or his own. So in ijara, muntahiya bit tamlik, which is certainly permissible, an ijara which ends up with purchase. In a financial sense, it seems unfair for the client as he pays installments without owning anything against those installments. I mean, consider that. In both cases, in the case of ijara and in the case of musharaka, the client makes payments over a period of time. The difference is that in the ijara, those payments do not lead to ownership immediately, whereas in the musharaka, muntahiya mutanaqisa, the payments lead month by month to a greater proportion of ownership. And US Bank, as I explained earlier, will detail down to the cent, down to the penny, exactly how much you, the homeowner, actually own month after month. That's a fundamental difference. Again, you know, both are legitimate means of finance, but you know, when viewed from the perspective of the homeowner, there are a number of advantages to the diminishing musharaka product. I believe also, although I'm not sure whether there's a recourse clause, you know, you can tell us, Hussam, in an ijara contract or not. Whether they build those in or not, I'm not sure. It could be possible, but you know, whether that's the case here in the US, I'm not sure.
Well, I will tell you this. From a recourse perspective, there are states that prohibit recourse in the United States, and then there are states who allow recourse. In the states that recourse is allowed, almost all mortgage lenders go after the consumer in the case of default. And if they didn't recoup what they lent that consumer, what they put out, they will go after that person's personal assets, potential savings accounts. They can garner wages, whatever it may be. There's no end to it until they recoup all of the funds that were lent. Because guidance does not lend money in these transactions, we have what's called a non-recourse clause across the entire nation. And so we don't pursue a customer who defaults if we are owed on our portion of the property. And let's assume the property sells. This is in cases where the property has to be sold through a dissolution of the agreement, has to be sold on the marketplace. And if it's sold for less than it was originally purchased, that's when recourse comes into place, where lenders can come after you. In our case, once that property is sold, in the case of default and such, there's really nothing tying us together any longer. The property was really the glue between us. The reason why we were co-owners is because of the property. There was no money lent out and such. So So once it's liquidated, there's no recourse to go after anything that's outstanding. That's a major difference, and that I think a lot of times does take the cake when it comes to folks who are not even Muslim, who look at our structure and say, now that's fair. During the crisis of 2008, 2009, the mortgage crisis, there were articles all over major press in the U.S. where home buyers turned in their keys to their banks and said, I'm underwater. I'm not able to make my payments any longer, but I also cannot sell the house for a gain to be able to repay you. In fact, it will sell for less, and I will still owe you money, so here are the keys. Well, many banks issued deficiency judgments against those buyers, even though those buyers were now homeless. Some of them even left the state to restart their careers and such. And they pursued them through this deficiency judgment, the banks did, for the remainder plus interest accruing on the late fees. And this pursuit took years. So you could have been starting your new life and you still had this deficiency judgment against you to repay the loan you borrowed because there wasn't enough from the sale of the property and the interest accruing on it over time. This hurt the economy even more over the course of the recovery, and it hurt many good people who didn't, this wasn't their fault. So this is a major difference in the structure that we constantly talk about being the Musharaka Mutanaqisa structure. This is an easy one. Is refinancing allowed? I think the answer is a straightforward yes. If you're currently in a lender-based, bank-based, riba-based mortgage, you absolutely can. If we operate in your state, you can absolutely refinance out of that into a Musharaka Mutanaqisa structure. Someone is asking about audits. Does guidance get audited by its Sharia Supervisory Board or an external board? Now, I will have to clarify this. Guidance's Sharia Supervisory Board is an independent board. It is an outside board of Sharia scholars, with supervisory services. So, audits. Does guidance get audited?
Yes. Because I'm a member of the Sharia board who lives here in the United States, I have been given the privilege of visiting the headquarters of guidance and sitting down with your people and talking about your operations once a year, and then turning around and reporting to the General Sharia Board. Now, the last couple of years, last year, of course, we missed because of COVID. But last year, the audit, rather than having me travel up to headquarters, as I mentioned earlier, I financed my own home by means of guidance, and so I had a very clear vision of exactly what happens, where, when, and how. And so I will be at our next meeting, inshallah. I will be presenting a report from my personal experience. But generally speaking, yes, we do, of course, keep an eye on guidance. If there are any changes to be made in any kind of a document, even a single word, the legal counsel there in Reston gives me a telephone call and asks me, what do you think about this? What do you think the Sharia board is going to say? Should we present it to them? How do we present it to them? So on and so forth. Anything to do with the practices, with the structure, with the contracts, with agreements with different vendors and so on, all of this goes by, in one way or another, the eyes of the Sharia board.
Dr. Imran, do you have any comments on that, on the audits?
No, I'm very much close to our executive member of this Sharia board from its inception, And I have on daily basis with the guidance team engagements on different things or different issues of these different matters. So any time when they have a particular issue or question, so I usually available. So I'm to give them the reply. One thing which you asked before, and mashallah, Sheikh Yusuf Dalal De Lorenzo has replied in detail about that why we are doing diminishing musharaka, why we are not using murabaha or ijara. And you know that we have at the time of when we were developing these products, these three options. But first of all, we couldn't do murabaha because murabaha is usually used in all Islamic banks for short-term financing, not for longer term, because the price must be fixed. So then there is no any flexibility of changing of at for the lender or for the creditor from the or for the client to change. So it's not used for the longer term. So muraba is cannot be used. Secondly, in Ijara, as Sheikh has mentioned, that basically in Ijara, only lessor has the ownership till the end. So whether that particular mortgage house is a bigger or smaller, it's irrelevant. But in our this product, this it basically gives equity of the client to the client whenever he gives some payment. So as well as he gives decreases the rental on fair basis. So that is why we have developed that particular product of the Mission Musharaka, and alhamdulillah it is very widely well accepted in the world, and now mashallah different people are using in different countries as well.
Thank you, Dr. Imran and Sheikh Yusuf. Those were very, very helpful answers. Someone asked, can I pay sooner? Can I? And really, the short answer is absolutely. As a co-owner, you have the right to buy us out at any time. There is no prepayment penalty that we would impose. At any point in time, typically the terms of the agreements are anywhere between 30 years, 15, potentially 20. And so anytime during that term, you can buy us out. You can buy out our shares right away, and you would own the home as a sole owner at that point. And a related question is, should a co-owner decide to sell the house? What happens to any of the appreciating value in the home? So assuming the home was purchased at 200, and then we sell that, and then you decide in year 4 or whenever, anytime during the term to sell the home, you're free to sell the home. And if the home sells for 250,000, purchased at 200, sold at 250, all the appreciating value of that home goes back to who? It goes back to the buyer, the customer, because the customer selected that home, selected the neighborhood, did the research, and so on and so forth. And the whole idea is for us, we're not in this partnership. Again, this is not a partnership to engage in enterprise, to wait for the property's value to increase so we can make money on the increase. We don't make a penny on the increase. All of the appreciating value, it goes back to the consumer, because that's the fair approach for this structure. We're facilitating home ownership so that you can gain the benefits of home ownership, which partly is wealth creation. It's appreciation over time. So that one, I think, is a pretty straightforward and easy answer. Let's see. This one is, where does guidance get its funds from? I can quickly cover this. Well, I mentioned it at the top of the program. Guidance Financial Group is a subsidiary of a much larger organization, a Muslim-owned private equity firm, global in nature, 27 countries around the world. And we're very fortunate. Our parent company, owned by Dr. Hamour family and partners, we have our own funds. So we utilize our own funding. And then we sell these Musharaka Mutanaqisas to a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac to get our liquidity, to liquidate and get our funds back so we can help more and more and more and more homeowners. That's for our ability to stay liquid so that we can continuously provide this funding through this incredibly unique and innovative structure. So that's the short answer to that. Now, one question about the LLC structure. The guidance program, the Musharaka Mutanaqisa program, the client balance co-ownership program, actually has, with every contract, an LLC created from the state of Delaware. We've been creating these LLCs to formally structure this partnership, this co-ownership. First, does guidance share in that? The answer is yes. I'll answer that. That's guidance absolutely shares in the cost of the LLC, but there is a portion of the cost that is $18.75 per month that the customer is obligated to pay. Now, why the LLC? Sheikh Yusuf, Dr. Imran, do you guys want to talk about that?
I think you can answer that one, Hossam, for the reason that
Sure.
That's basically a business thing.
Well, it is a legitimization of the actual agreement of this co-ownership, and at the same time, it's a consumer protection step in the direction where, should anything happen to guidance, the consumers are protected from any kind of litigation. Let's say the limited liability company that's created for every single musharaka, every single co-ownership structure. Yes, Dr.
If I say something, you know that this concept of limited liability and its permissibility, it's not new. It has been discussed for a longer period. Even my grandfather, Sheikh Mufti Muhammad Shafi Rahimahullah, and his teacher, Allama Shafari Thanvi Rahimahullah, they have written in detail that it is allowed to create a limited liability concept, and because it is for the protection of the equity holders from the other creditors, and there are so many examples of that which already has been allowed, or as an precedent for that, like waqf, trust, mudarba, or something like that. So these are all the limited liability things. So basically, even in previous days, they used to a slave. So, and the master of the slave used to allow him to trade. So sometimes he purchases things on credit. So then, for example, if he has defaulted more than his price, so all the Islamic jurists have mentioned that he should be sold out or liquidated, that slave, to pay off that loan, but not beyond that. So what does it mean? It means that your liability is basically limited towards that. So it has been well accepted and well recognized concept in all ancient books as well. Our classical books mention all these things.
I might also mention that it wasn't the LLC also protects the nature of the contract. In other words, it's set in stone once it gets into that state. So from a legal perspective, there's no way that anyone is going to tamper with the Sharia compliant aspects of, or any other aspects of that contract once it's been memorialized in an LLC.
Thank you both. Thank you both. I think that helps clarify it for many of our audience members. So we're getting to a lot of questions that are repetitive in nature, and I don't want to put us through that process. But one of the questions that I think can help clarify it a little bit more is about the U.S. Bank. You touched upon U.S. Bank, Sheikh Yusuf. And I want to clarify your comments. I'd like to maybe build on them. During your section, you mentioned that U.S. Bank is a service provider, right? A servicer. Now, U.S. Bank is a bank and it has its own banking functions, but they actually went out years ago and purchased servicing companies, and they got into the servicing business. Now, what is the servicing business? The servicing business is one in which where a mortgage company has administrative duties where they would send out monthly statements to their customers, alerting them that their monthly mortgage payment is due. Here's the amount, here's how much, and so on and so forth. That's an administrative duty. And then they would collect the payments as they come in, administer, and so on and so forth. So that is a function that guidance has chosen not to do internally. The cost of doing it internally would only cause us to have a higher cost borne by the consumers. So outsourcing is what majority of mortgage companies do in the United States when it comes to servicing. And so what we did is we hired the Bank of America servicing arm, just like many others do, and because they are actually one of the best at this. And what we do is simply pay them to do the payment collections, to send out the invoices, to remind customers who have not submitted their payment through mail, through telephone calls. So it's an administrative service, and that's all it is. So I wanted to make that clear to our audience as to why we don't do it. It can be costly to do it internal, and therefore it does not make business sense to do it internally. And so let's see. I believe most of the questions that I'm seeing now are in one way or another part of the core items that we've already discussed. I will remind our audience members that there are a slew of different resources that we're sharing with them in the chat box. Links to where they can learn more, watch videos. We have these 4 FAQ videos. They're all very, very short. They're about a minute each, maybe perhaps as long as a minute and a half each. But they touch upon these core things that we just discussed: servicing, the investor Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, how guidance determines the price, and so on and so forth. These are incredibly helpful, and I would encourage everyone that's joined us today to visit the site and view those videos. If you prefer to read to get into more details, we do have the white paper that's actually in the handout section of this webinar. So you may download it, or you can find it also on our website. But the white paper, the Guidance Residential Declining Balance Co-ownership Program white paper, gives you a lot of detailed information. Also on our website, plenty of information about the states we do serve. I see a lot of people asking us, do you operate in Canada? Can you provide me this program in Canada? Unfortunately, we do not operate in Canada. We only operate in 34 states in the United States of America. And that's because really the Canadian structure of secondary markets and such is not as scalable to the public as it is here in the United States, with Fannie and Freddie being the chartered institutions to help create the liquidity. So with all of that, I want to see if Dr. Imran and Sheikh Yusuf, you have any parting comments or thoughts that with the audience before we wrap up our webinar today.
Just to thank everyone for their patience. Jazakumullahu khairan, and I wish all of you all the very, very best, inshallah.
Yeah, at the end, I would say that that being a Muslim, and we have it's a good to make questions, because there is a hadith of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that as-su'alu nisful ilm, that question is half knowledge, half of the knowledge. Once you have a question and you have particular query, then you will reach to the answer. So keep trying, exploring, and learning and getting training of these things, so that you will have more and more Sharia compliant these things, so that you will have more options available as in the other countries for different banking options, so that you could do everything in a Sharia compliant way, which has the really very positive impact into the not only into particular country, in it would be for all over the world, inshallah, and globally. So with these remarks, I'm thankful for all the participants, and especially our coordinator, Mr. Hussam Kutab. Mashallah, he has mentioned everything with a very detail and in a very, very good way. Mashallah, managed that particular event. So thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Imran. Thank you for those kind words, Sheikh Yusuf. I want to let our audience know, again, there's plenty of information on our website, on our blogs and such. There was one question that I did not get to, but I'll make a comment about it right now. and that is about a local group called the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of North America, AMJA. Whether or not they support guidance, the answer is yes. In prior years, there was some misunderstanding of our program, but the answer is yes. In fact, we are the most highly recommended program in the U.S. for American Muslims, and thanks to the leadership of AMJA for declaring that recently. So with that, I think we had an incredibly insightful 2.5 hours here today on a Sunday. And I want to genuinely thank our panelists, our esteemed speakers. Sheikh Yusuf, Talal Lorenzo, thank you very much for taking the time out of your Sunday to be with us. Dr. Imran, thank you very, very much for your time. I know it's very late in Pakistan at the moment, and please relay our gratitude and our thanks to your amazing father, Sheikh Mufti Muhammad Taqi Osmani, for being with us at the top of the hour during this webinar. His insights are incredible as always, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help him recover from this fever that he's having, and inshallah a full and speedy one at that. Thank you all very much. Thank you to our audience for being with us, and please stay safe, stay healthy, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.